You're listening to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a podcast where we explore what it's like getting older, the peaks, the valleys, and everything in between. In this season of Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, we're covering topics related to solo aging. I'm your host, Cheryl Proska. Let's grow old together. On today's episode, I'm joined by Donovan. Ellen is an RN senior care consultant and president of One Life Consulting, a boutique consulting firm that helps older adults and their families navigate the many challenges associated with late life care. Ellen has devoted her entire nursing career to providing the best outcomes for older adults. And now she brings this expertise to the senior care community in a new way. Ellen, welcome, and thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm doing great, Cheryl. Thank you so much for having me today.
My pleasure. So you're joining me to talk about how older adults and their loved ones can prepare for late life care. I'd like to get started by getting to know you a little bit better. Can you share your background and professional experience with us?
Sure, Cheryl. So I've been a registered nurse my whole life. I started out at Abington, which is now Abington Jefferson, as a medical surgical nurse. And then basically primarily taking care of geriatric patients. And one day they decided to split our unit into two, which was med-surg nursing in addition to hospice patients. I started caring for those older, population. And it really resonated with me. I really enjoyed taking care of them. And after I did that, I had my children and I did various nursing roles. And then I took a position in long-term care as a RN assessment coordinator and then a care coordinator. And it really gave me perspective because I dealt a lot with older adults and I helped them, through a lot of challenges that they experienced. After that, I took a different direction and worked in marketing for non-medical home care. And this really opened my eyes to the business side of things. And I really learned a lot from, entrepreneurs, and I watched what they did. And then also I grew a huge network of professional resources that are extremely valuable to me in this profession. And so that really helped me, start and gave me the confidence to start One Life Consulting.
It's interesting because my career journey is similar to yours, but opposite. So I've always been in marketing and on the business side of things. And when I started working at Friends Life Care, it opened my eyes into what people like you, the clinical people who are helping individuals with their maybe medical needs or home care needs. So like your eyes were open to the business side, my eyes was open to how you need to be as a person to take care of someone, especially as they're aging. So is there anything to add about what was it in your life that led you down this path of working with older adults and now with One Life Consulting?
Yes. So personally, I helped my grandparents. I helped my parents. I helped my in-laws when they were in hospital situations where they needed guidance and advice. And I supported them through whatever was going on with their medical needs. And I really said, you know what? There's no playbook out there that guides people to do this type of work. And that's when I really thought I there's a need for this. And I wanted to start my consultancy. So that's like how I started One Life Consulting on my personal experiences with my own family.
So, between your career experience and your family experience, I can imagine you've seen most, if not all, of what happens when someone is aging and on their aging journey. What should older adults and their loved ones be on the lookout for when either they're aging or their loved ones are aging?
So that's a great question. The number one thing is that what I see is that older adults don't plan and they don't want to talk about it. They
Hmm.
think that they're just going to age gracefully and nothing's going to happen, which would be great. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So, they really need to start thinking about things now rather than later. That's a huge thing. And I think the other part is they have to start taking care of themselves, like watching their diet, keep their body moving, get enough sleep, work on your cognition, make sure you're staying cognitively active as well. And, sometimes older adults think, I've earned this right to eat, 3 scoops of ice cream and cake every night for dessert, for example. And, you know, it's so bad. Like sugar is our enemy. And I cringe when I hear like diabetics or pre-diabetics say that because they're only going to make their current health condition worse in doing that. And I know it gives you pleasure and you're happy about it, but I think older adults need to start thinking about, what is that going to look like, for their future. And it does impact a lot of things. I mean, sugar, can affect your sleep, your gut function, your cognition, so many things that I think people just don't realize. And so I just like to bring it to people's awareness. Even if they're not diabetic, it still is a negative. And I just want people to think about it because it can, you know, it's going to cause more health problems later down the road.
So, when we do have these loved ones that we're having concerns about, what can we do? We see someone who is maybe not eating as they should or getting some exercise or really just in general taking care of themselves. What can we do?
Yeah, another great question. I get this like every day somebody will call and ask, and this is difficult. It was difficult for me and my family. Um, Basically, the older adult usually doesn't want to acknowledge that there might be a problem. They might be, in a little bit of denial. So what I always suggest is if you have an example and you can say like, "Hey mom, I noticed, in your refrigerator there's some expired food. I'm concerned about that because what if, you're going to go in there and eat that? Like if it's expired, you could get sick. So this is like what I'm worried about." And I think when you give them a solid, concrete example, it does help them see what you're talking about instead of just coming in and being like, "Mom, I see you have spoiled food, in your refrigerator." And the way you are approaching the situation, I think is very important. I think you have to be calm when you're speaking and very matter of fact. And I think you don't want to, gang up or have like all your siblings like confront somebody either. I think what happens is, you want to talk to your siblings about if you have siblings that there is an issue with mom and, get everybody in alignment. But, I think when you don't have siblings in alignment, it's going to cause more problems down the line because one one sibling will say there's a problem, one will say there isn't a problem. So you just want to try to get everybody on board together and, have one, it's almost easier to have one point person talk to mom or dad. And you can decide in your family, who do you think that person, is best to do that, handle that situation.
And it sounds like the approach is maybe one of the most important parts, where you, as the loved one coming to the older adult in your life who you're concerned about, you really need to prepare for this conversation and try to come at it with empathy and compassion, not, letting it kind of bubble up and then come at a person that may feel attacked. And then of course they're going to get defensive. So just the approach that you're going to take seems like that may even need some rehearsal before going into these difficult conversations.
Absolutely. And it's really finding the right time.
Hmm.
When is your loved one the best? Is it in the morning? Sometimes it might be later after lunch. You kind of want to catch them when they're in a good mood. That is also important. And I always tell my adult children that call to speak from your heart too, because if you're feeling stressed and scared and overwhelmed and you're constantly worrying about them, then share that with your loved one. And sometimes, it's okay if you're going to break down and cry in front of them, because maybe they need to see how it really is impacting you and how you do love them and you want the best for them. And sometimes that works. And I know people are afraid, but it's okay to be vulnerable and let your
Hmm.
loved ones see that.
We're indirectly talking about this, but I'm thinking about the parent child dynamic, and how over the course of time it may start to flip, where the child feels compelled to initiate these conversations with their parents, and about really touchy topics, their health and their finances. So, is there anything more to add about how that adult child can get started with this, or how they can have these conversations with their parents or the other older adults in their lives?
Yeah, it is extremely difficult. I've had difficulty with my own family doing this. Again, I think it's, the older person, of course, wants to hide any problems from their children. They want to cover it up and really like kind of make very light of the situation that's happening. And so, as the adult child, the roles are switched because your parents have always told you, you know how they've raised you and they've told you how life is going to go and everything, and they directed you. But now, they're declining, and now you have to step up and say some difficult things that they really don't want to hear. And it's very uncomfortable. It's very intimidating for a lot of people. And I always say, like, I'm a neutral third party that can come in and help you with that difficult conversation. If you're struggling and you don't have the courage to say what needs to be said, then I can assist you with that or coach you through that, because so many people have difficulty with that. Um, Again, I think it's bringing examples to them. And, especially like for a good example is, a lot of people say, you know, dad's not paying his bills. I know that he's having problems. And you might have to point out, where the delinquent bills are and that they're not getting paid. And now there's late fees involved. You might have to point that out to your loved one in order for them to actually see the problem and to try to resolve it. So I think it's just about being open and honest with them. And again, your approach about being like really calm and non-judgmental of whatever's going on, because it is very difficult for, you know, the older adult.
And one thing that particularly stood out to me about what you said was the importance of sometimes having a neutral third party there. And I can think of examples in my life where maybe I said something or made a suggestion and I just couldn't get through to someone. But then another person who maybe doesn't have that close of a relationship would say the same thing, and for whatever reason, that gets through to the person. And that's great because it gets the result that I had wanted. However, sometimes, well, at least personally, I have to accept that I'm just not going to get through to someone. And I do need the support of that third party to come with me.
And that's okay, right? As long as the end result is that they're getting taken care of.
We've talked about like older adults who do have that family tie. There are some older adults who are aging alone, are solo agers. Where might they be able to turn if they're having challenges and struggles or even want to start planning for their later life care?
Yeah, so this is really tough for the solo ager, and it's very stressful. And I think the biggest key is to plan in advance, because when you're in a health crisis, you want to have a plan in place, and solo agers aren't going to be able to manage this health crisis unless they have that solid plan. And if they can have somebody in their life to turn to, have somebody there like an advocate, I think that is also very important. It will help alleviate their anxiety, and they'll feel that they, are not alone. But that is the number one thing, and that's my best advice, is to start earlier for a solo um, ager.
And start getting those supports in place. So maybe a first step would be to work with an advocate and kind of get your game plan for what might you really need to start getting in place, and where you're seeing some holes in your plan, start getting some additional supports in place, because it can be an emergent situation if you were to have some type of health crisis and there you haven't identified someone to help you. I'm not even sure what would happen then.
Right. And know also that that plan might change. I mean, as health conditions change.
Hmm.
And sometimes like what you're planning today, might look differently tomorrow if, you had a health crisis, or health condition come in that you weren't expecting. So the plan is constantly changing. But again, I think initially, in your mind what you're going to have set up for you in a case where, say you go to the hospital, and what is the post hospitalization going to look like for you? Have you thought about that? Because a lot of people don't. And so, I wish it didn't have to be this way, but life happens.
And I'm thinking about someone who may be, for example, living in a two-story home, bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs. They have some type of health decline or an accident or a fall, which
Mhm.
falls do occur quite often. And then they have to come home to that house and it's not set up for that. Who can help them get set up for something like that? So that, I mean,
Mhm. Yes.
it's just something to start thinking about. And you had said the sooner the better. Can we identify what sooner might mean? For example, when should older adults start thinking about this decision making for their late life care?
Absolutely. So, If you are, for example, a 70-year-old that has um, Parkinson's with dementia, then that person is going to have to plan sooner because it's a chronic progressive disease. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse. So I don't have a specific age where I would say, yes, this is when you need to plan. I really think it's going to depend upon each individual with what medically they have going on with them, if there's any, medical conditions. And then that's going to dictate more or less when they should start. But I will say, if you're 85, this is not a time to start. You should start much sooner than 85. And I feel like a lot of older adults don't want to talk about it, think about it until that age. So I think that's really important.
And there are some trigger points in life, such as retiring or signing up for Medicare, or maybe if you have children, when you become an empty nester, or when you have a grandchild. So there are these life events that occur that maybe we can suggest that maybe that can be a trigger point. If you're coming up on your retirement or Medicare, maybe it's time to start thinking. If you're empty nesters and now you might have the time because you're not managing your children, maybe now's the time. So that just what came up for me about what's going on in people's lives as they are aging, to allow them to take charge of this decision making and planning.
That would be ideal, Cheryl. That would be really smart. And I know people, it's kind of morbid, I think. So a lot of times people don't want to talk about it.
Mhm.
But it definitely should be something that families talk about sooner.
So not everyone plans ahead, and sometimes a crisis is going to occur. What might you recommend for people, families, when they do find themselves in a crisis situation?
Yeah, so crisis is extremely messy. It's less messy if you've already spoken to your family about your plans and what that would look like as far as if something did medically happen to you, and you're already have your plan in place. But if you don't have any plan in place, it is kind of a disaster because now you are in crisis mode, and it's not the time to be making these decisions about your life when you're super stressed, you're not well. It's just not an ideal time. So everything just becomes more complicated, and you might not get you know a place that, if you thought about a place that you might have to go sooner, say a rehab, then later it would be so much better to, you know, have a visit with a rehab unit, say before a health crisis would happen. So you would know, like, this is where I am going, this is what it looks like, rather than just being in a hospital in a situation where a case manager says, you can go to X, Y, and Z, and you go to a place and a rehab, and it might not be the place that you want to go. And a lot of times that's what happens. I mean, you have to choose a place quickly. So I always say, do some research ahead of time about the places that are out there. And then at least you'll know what places you would like to go, because it's your decision. You have more of an input, and I'd rather them have that opportunity to do so sooner.
Would you prefer to age independently in your own home or live in a nursing facility? I know what I'd rather do. Friends Life Care membership offers just that. Plan today for a future lived at home with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience while protecting your savings. Learn about your options at a free seminar or webinar. Register at friendsLifeCare.org/register or call 215-628-8964. In addition to the stress and the chaos that can occur from not planning ahead, we also might not understand the cost of later life care. Can you go over that with us, like the different types of care and the associated costs for them?
Sure. So I'll give you some generalizations for people that want to age in place. The non-medical home care ranges, which would be non-medical home care includes a certified nursing assistant or a direct caregiver or a companion care. It would range from $30 up until $45 an hour. So, and then if you needed skilled nursing care, 24/7 nursing care in a community, that ranges about 10,000 up until I just heard $18,000 a month. So there's a huge range there, and it's a lot of money. And I feel that older adults should be aware of these costs. You know, you have CCRCs, which are continuing care retirement communities that have all different levels of care: independent living, assisted living, long-term skilled nursing care, and also memory care. But these places, and you would get a lifetime contract, but they require a lump sum down payment, and then you do pay monthly. And that could be a few $100,000 to put down on this type of community. And it's very costly. And then you have senior living communities that are a little bit different. They have independent living, assisted living, and memory care. And they would just have a community cost, which community fee, which would range from $3,000 to about $10,000 down, and then you pay monthly. And there's ranges there because it depends if you're on independent or assisted. There might have tiers of different levels of care depending on how much care you need with like bathing, dressing, medication management, etc. So that can range, you know, that the range is going to vary. And then it also will depend on your apartment type. But I will say that if you need memory care, you know, these places are expensive. It could be anywhere from $6,000 to $11,000 a month for memory care. So there's a lot of cost that I feel a lot of people aren't aware of until they get to be in a situation where they might need that care. So I think doing research ahead of time is key.
And not having any type of asset protection in place, $10,000 to $18,000 a month, $30 to $45 an hour, that could wipe out the savings of the average person. And individuals who are relying on Social Security or some type of pension plan, they've saved for perhaps the lifestyle without care.
Mhm.
So just adding on how much it might cost is definitely something to consider, and then consider the options to add on some financial protection in one way or another if that person would so choose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have caregivers in our audience as part of our listeners, and we all know that caregiving can really be a consuming responsibility. What guidance can you offer for that group?
Yeah. So this is so important because we give so much of ourselves. The one thing I will say is I do have on my website a free blog that is dedicated to the caregiver and to help support them. And you can visit my website if you'd like to subscribe to that. And self-care is never selfish. And when you go on an airplane, the first thing they talk about is putting on your oxygen mask for yourself so that you're able to breathe, and then apply it for your loved one. And the same thing applies when you're taking care of somebody. If we can't take care of ourselves first, then we are not going to be able to take care of our loved one. And so many times our caregivers get burnout because they are so stressed and they need a break. And a lot of times they're afraid to ask for help. So I always tell them it's okay to ask for help. We want you to ask for help. There's places that you could have your loved one go for respite care, or maybe have a live-in caregiver in your home to give you more of a break, or add some more hours in for a caregiver. There's ways that we can do this to help you and make sure that you're healthy. Because again, if that caregiver's not healthy, they are not going to be there for their loved one. And then what? What are they going to do? I mean, their loved one's going to have who's going to be there for them? So it's super, super important.
And I love that. Your like self-care isn't selfish. And if we take care of ourselves, we can even better take care of the people that we're supporting. And sometimes you're supporting an older adult in your life, you're supporting a child in your life, you're working, you're supporting your household, and you can find that there's no time left for you. So it's so important to, it sounds like, identify what self-care might look like for you, and then ways to fit it in so that you can come back restored and refreshed.
Yeah, and it could just mean, finding 20 minutes a day to go outside for a walk. It could just be having that alone time for yourself. Whatever you need to do to, refuel your tank and to feel energized, because then you'll be able to give so much more to your loved one.
So, Ellen, before we close, I would love to hear more about One Life Consulting and the services you offer and the book that you contributed to.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Debbie Compton is the lead author, and the book is called Caregivers Advocate, a complete guide for support and resources. And it's coming out in the beginning of July. And I'm a contributing author. And my chapter is called Be Their Voice. And it's all about ways that we can advocate for our loved ones and strategies. But the book is really a great resource because each chapter is going to have a different theme and a different way to help the caregiver and support them. And then at the back of the book, it's going to be a list of resources that they can refer to. And the book is produced, the publisher is Laura DeFranco from the Brave Healer Productions. And it's just been an amazing experience to work with her and her team. And so I'm super happy about it. And as far as One Life Consulting goes, I am there to help you plan. I do an assessment, which is about an hour or two. I get to know you, what your thoughts are about aging, how I can support you through it, and really just support you and educate you on what you need to know in whatever you're going through. And I help with, giving people a lot of resources and help them with non-medical home care needs, whether that's non-medical home care, whether that's therapies that they might need, like a specialist in PT for Parkinson's. I have really good quality resources for that. And, I do a lot of crisis management, but I also do a lot of planning ahead and talking to people what their plan looks like for aging. And, I'm here to support everybody. I don't want anybody to feel alone. or unsupported, and I'm with them on their journey.
And you meet people where they are, whether they're arriving at 60 years old, perfectly healthy and ready to plan with you, or you're getting that crisis call from a son or a daughter about a parent who has experienced some type of change in health. And it just amazes me that you can really do it all in that capacity. And I just so appreciate your time and your expertise and really helping all of us have now a better understanding of what it might take to plan ahead for later life care and the support that you and wonderful people like you provide. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, thank you so much, Cheryl. I had a great time.
Thank you for listening to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a unique program focused on aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience. You can find links and show notes from this episode on our website at friendslifecare.org/podcast. Thank you to Ellen Donovan for joining us today. You can learn more about Ellen and One Life Consulting by visiting onelifeadvocates.com and on Facebook, LinkedIn, and X. If you like our show, please rate, review, subscribe, and join us next time. To learn more about aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience, subscribe to our blog at friendslifecare.org/blog.